I oftentimes feel like Yu-Gi-Oh! Is missing something. And it's something that you guys kind of already know about. It's something that we talk about a fair bit on this channel, but it also is something that I'm pretty much going to talk about until it happens. And I was reminded about it again recently. So that is the fact that a lot of decks feel like they just don't have a place in this game. And what do I mean by that? Well, the example I'm going to give, because it's pretty relevant, is the new set Amazing Defenders. So this one came out, like last week, and it's a pretty interesting set. It's another one of these deck builder sets, which means that you get 3 new archetypes. The Rescue Ace monsters, which are a kind of hybrid fire machine thing. They're based on a rescue operation type of thing. It's cool. They're neat. There's also the Pearly or Purely monsters. Don't know how to say that one. Somebody can inform me in the comments, but they're pretty cool. It's like this Xyz-based archetype. It's kind of about giving your Xyz monsters additional materials to give them stronger effects. And then the Makonko archetype, which is sort of a hybrid, like ritual and equip spell based archetype. They're all really cool. People really don't like this set. It's been just kind of poorly received. A lot of people think that nothing in it's really worth a lot of money. Even the collector's rare reprints in it aren't like super duper highly sought after. And it's a bit of a shame to me. The reason why people don't like the set, for the most part, is just that the 3 archetypes in it are not really competitively viable. And that sucks, right? But the bar is pretty high. I mean, we're dealing with Kashtira, which is about to get a huge boost in Photon Hypernova, Tearlaments, Sprites, these things that have been around really for the last, couple months. And those are really strong decks, and these new decks coming out don't really stand a chance against them. Maybe you can find some neat engines or techable things, but generally speaking, the commonly held belief is that these decks just don't stand a chance. And people are kind of right about that, I mean, these aren't the strongest decks. But I think the problem comes in because why does that have to really be the entire scope of how we judge this product? Unfortunately, because the archetypes in it don't do well, their prices are considered low, the product doesn't sell, no one really seems interested in it. But I think that just sucks, It sucks that these decks don't have a place where they can thrive, a place where they can just be played for fun. Because here's how all the deck builder archetypes work. They've worked this way for the last several years. The deck builder set comes out, it's got 3 different archetypes. People look for the one that's the most competitively viable, if any at all, and that's kind of the one that gets all the attention. But the truth is that these archetypes do work fine. And by work fine, I mean that sure, they're not going to be beating, like a Shizu tier every single game, but they are really usually pretty well put together, They're fairly consistent. They usually have a straightforward game plan, and it typically works. There are plenty of examples of this. I've always suggested deck builder sets as good sort of just beginner or mid-level decks to just learn with. They work well. I am currently playing, I think, pretty much a deck out of every single deck builder set. Most recently, I built Labyrinth. I play Exo Sisters. Just things like that. Witchcrafters, Rika. And all of them are totally playable and totally fine. There's some that end up being stronger than others, Evil Twins or Drytron or maybe Adamant Raider and Eldritch. Those come to mind. Sky Strikers is an older example, but definitely a big one. The thing is, though, I think with Yu-Gi-Oh! Today, it sucks that cards are so oftentimes gauged immediately on meta potential. And not every deck can be the best thing, and that really sucks, but that's just how it is. And I think that it sucks that these decks then don't get any other place to exist, because Yu-Gi-Oh! Only has one format, and that's the advanced format. So basically, if you want to play these decks, I don't want to say out of luck. I mean, you can always build Purely, you can build Rescue Ace, and you can play them and have some fun. But if you go to even locals, depending on where you go, I mean, you're going to have to deal with the more powerful decks that these decks oftentimes aren't really equipped to contend with. And if you're not willing to play in that format, then there isn't another format. That is what I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is missing. I think it sucks that so many cool archetypes come out, or will get support or whatever, and they just get thrown to the wayside, deemed useless and trash and just forgotten about because they can't beat the best decks. But what about playing against each other, right? So in theory, I imagine that a Purely deck versus a Rescue Ace deck is probably a really fun, exciting, back and forth game. We can, take that back to say Valence. That's an archetype that came in Tactical Masters that a lot of people don't really like. I bet a Valence deck against a Makonko deck is probably a lot of fun to play. In fact, I know that these matchups usually are because I, like, you know, a lot of us at Team APS have like built these decks and like played with them. I remember like Alex had an Evil Eye deck and I liked playing Evil Eyes with my Witchcrafter deck. Like, it's a fun kind of control matchup. Neither deck is extremely OP or anything, but they both have like clear-cut game plans, and they don't oftentimes like OTK each other or anything. It's kind of what I think a lot of people look for, like a lot of maybe more casual or nostalgic players look for in their Yu-Gi-Oh games, is just this sort of back and forth match where you're getting to do your thing, but the game isn't like ended or decided in one turn. The problem is though, is that you, in order to like play Yu-Gi-Oh that way, in order to enjoy that sort of a back and forth game, you have to find a person who's willing to do that with you. A person who has the same sort of idea of what deck building looks like and what, you know, the generally agreed on power level should be. Because these decks can quickly get out of hand when you add little things to them. Like the pure Drytron deck is actually a lot of fun, and it fits within the power level of most of these deck builder sets. But as we know, with Drytrons, the moment that you added in things like, you know, Eva or Cyber Angel Ben 10 and just those sorts of cards into the mix, that's where Drytron went over the edge. So it's tough because it's like, well, maybe somebody just wants to enjoy a pure Drytron deck, but you can't really do that in the advanced format of Yu-Gi-Oh! If you're playing Drytron, it's kind of expected that you got to run it as best as it can be run. And there are some, you know, half solutions that Konami has offered. They seem extremely reluctant to really commit to the Heart of the Underdog format, but they have talked about it. And I think that's really cool. So Heart of the Underdog format is one of these alternative Yu-Gi-Oh formats where the local card shop, I guess, is in charge of deciding on like a tier list or set of cards that like can and can't be used. It's basically supposed to take the meta decks out of the equation. So maybe an example of what a Heart of the Underdog format would look like right now would be that you aren't allowed to run any tier limits cards and probably not any Shizu cards, or you're not allowed to run them together. You can't run Sprites, you can't run Kashtera, you can't run Bystials, those sorts of things. It's tricky though because, as we've mentioned in the past a lot, it's tough for people to decide on exactly what fun means, since, you know, maybe somebody wants to run just a pure Bystial deck with nothing else in it, and maybe that's more balanced than it would be when it's combined with tier limits. I don't really know, but I've seen cool Heart of the Underdog like tournaments that people have had. They've talked about online. I've highlighted a couple of them in videos on this channel, and I think that that's really cool when that sort of thing happens. It's just that, like, I really wish Konami would go the extra mile and just sort of outright say it. I think that they're reluctant to say that a certain archetype is better than another archetype, because that'd be like admitting that they kind of have like misbalanced things. So they're just like, okay, it's up to the card shop to decide, which is fine. I mean, maybe some card shops can come together and better decide what a fun deck tournament looks like and what the rules and sort of custom ban list for that should be. But I really think that that falls apart because like everyone sort of draws the line right in front of themselves. So I think that it's really Konami's responsibility to say, okay, if you want to do Heart of the Underdog format right now, then Tier and Kashtera just like aren't allowed. But that's kind of in its own tangent. The point is that I hate seeing Yu-Gi-Oh products come out and be just disregarded as, it sucks, it's not worth it, just because the deck itself can't beat the current top deck. It's not like these decks aren't still fun or aren't still playable. There's so many examples. Like Ninja's got support in Darkwing Blast and nobody really talks about it, but the Ninja deck is really fun. Alec built it, we've played a lot of matches with it, and it's a good time. Same with like the Neos deck that got support in Power of the Elements. It's fun, it's cool, but like no one cares because in the advanced format, going to like regionals and YCS events, there's just not really a place for it. I think that there needs to be a better defined place to play these decks, because if you don't have that, then you can see where people just are justifiably writing them off. So yeah, that's basically it. Let me know what you guys think. I mean, do you feel like there needs to be better support for this Heart of the Underdog thing that Konami has just vaguely sort of marketed and talked about? I, for one, think that there should, because it sucks when decks come out and they just don't quite have a place to be used, and so they just get thrown to the wayside. Yeah. Anyways, oh, and by the way, I should also mention, that's not to say that like you shouldn't run the decks and they can't win. I'm not trying to say they can't win. I think that, you know, with proper preparation, teching, all that stuff, they can. It's just that I'm talking about the general sentiments shared by the community and maybe how Konami could address those. All right, that's going to be it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Pass turn.